Society was created in the 1920s and 1930s in Germany. The leading Vril mediums were Maria Orzich, Gudrun, Sigrun, Traute and Heike. The Vril emblem has the following meaning. Left, the black side represents the present dark age of lies and deception. An evil cabal rules over this world and creates war after war. In the middle we see the lightning strike of divine intervention and Judgment Day. The right side in purple represents the new golden age. This age will be an age of peace, freedom and enlightenment. Hello brothers and sisters, this time I would like to make a video about the books Gems of Dominion from Stan Wolf, written by Stan Wolf. I have read his books, 7 of his books right now already. In German they're called Steine der Macht or Gems of Dominion, and I will try to make a short review on each and every one of their book. Now about book 1, called Gems of Dominion, The Mysteries at the Untersberg Mountain. He talks about the mysteries at the Untersberg Mountain in Bavaria, Germany. The Untersberg is, according to the Dalai Lama, actually the heart chakra of the world, and has a very important role to play during the global turning. The Untersberg is a very magical, apparently many things happened there that were mysterious. People disappeared and reappeared months later, so-called time dilations. But many things have happened there. Also in 1645, as an example, giants were also seen at the Untersberg, coming from the Untersberg and then disappearing at the Untersberg. And also often in history of the Untersberg, wild women, so-called wild women, of incredible beauty and reddish blonde hair were apparently seen on multiple times at the Untersberg, interacting with the locals. The mysteries of the Untersberg mountain goes actually really deep. You have to read special books about it and just read of the myths and legends at the Untersberg. In book 1, Stan Wolf talks about meeting Dr. Hans Kammler, General Hans Kammler, at Untersberg Mountain. And Dr. Hans Kammler then talks to Stan Wolf and actually asks Stan Wolf to help him do certain things. Hans Kammler states that they built a station at Untersberg where the time flow is 300 times more slower than outside. This means that 1 hour in the bunker equals to 300 hours outside. So for Kammler and his staff, only 3 months passed by, and for us outside, 70 years passed by. The SS unit is the last unit that is still practically active from the Second World War. All others, the Imperial Germans and Nagarta, the Imperial Germans on the Moon and the Imperial Germans on Mars, and the Imperial Germans in the colonies made in various places around the world and also in different timelines, are all second or third generation Imperial Germans. Whereas Dr. Hans Kammler in his station is still from the first generation practically, that still experienced the war. In this book further, Stan Wolf then explains on the mysteries of the so-called Black Stones. The history of the Black Stones, it is believed that some of these black gemstones were found at the grave of Alexander the Great, and that even the pharaohs of ancient Egypt have known of these black gemstones and the ethereal properties. Their ethereal properties. According to Stan Wolf, these black gemstones generate time flow distortion in certain places. They can be used to connect 2 different places through magical portals that lead from one place to another. You can travel from them like the Stargates in the series Stargate. Well, it is believed that also the ancient Egyptians created these pyramids not only as a tomb, but also as a communications device, as an ethereal projection device, and that the Egyptians then used these pyramids to communicate practically all across the space and the cosmos, and even project with their soul to other places. Stan Wolf also claims that the portals that are at Untersberg, can also travel in time. It is... Well, Hitler's Berghof, as an example, was built on the neighboring mountain on the Obersalzberg. This was Hitler's private retreat overlooking the Untersberg mountain. So Hitler also read of the Isa's revelations and the myths and the legends of the Untersberg, and also tried making contact with the spirit world at the Untersberg in Germany. It is said that Hitler also tried making contact to Isas at Untersberg, overlooking the Obersalzberg mountain. Well, he at the Berghof was overlooked at the Untersberg, and apparently the deity Isis, an ancient Germanic goddess, also from ancient Mesopotamia and also ancient Egypt, the deities always wander from one Aryan civilization to the next, but are always practically the same with slightly different names. So Isis is a deity, a spiritual entity that overlooks mankind, and the few the so-called brave soldiers that keep on fighting for the truth. She's the one that overlooks the operation here on planet Earth, apparently. And yeah, it is said that Adolf Hitler tried making contact with her at Untersberg in Bavaria, Germany. Well, in book 2, from Stan Wolf, Gems of Dominion, Time Corridors at Untersberg, that is time corridors. In book 2, Stan Wolf talks about how he used time portals to travel to the time of 1779 to visit Salzburg and to see how the young Mozart worked in his time. He writes this book practically from the first person perspective, and he portrays the preparations for the time travel in detail, getting the right money for the time, getting the right clothing, getting the right habits, etc, etc, etc. In this book, Kammler says that you can travel in time and even to the future, but that you cannot change the timeline. It is really difficult to make any changes at all. It is practically impossible, that's what he explains in this book, to change the timeline in such a fashion that you would create a paradox, where you change the future in such a manner that you no longer travel back in time, creating a paradox. Dr. Hans Kammler says that this is not possible, and that every advanced alien civilization knows how to time travel, but also knows the laws that are applied to it. There are certain time travel laws or temporal laws that are universally applicable. So you cannot create a paradox. Everything that would lead to an alteration of the timeline to create a paradox is not possible. Just imagine that you can travel in time, but you cannot alter the timeline in such a way that it would influence you in the future, not to be able to do that trip. So Kammler says that we are all enslaved. Kammler even says that we are practically enslaved, which is a reality. We are enslaved to the Zionist matrix of control. They control the money-making, they control the media, they control our minds. And they tell you that you have to work and work and work, or be out of a job, there's always a minority out of a job, etc, etc, etc. During the conversations in book 2, Kammler also explains how the zero-point energy devices work, and that they use the zero-point energy, the ether physics practically, to generate zero-point energy, and that they do not need any fuel, like diesel or gas, for their generators. At the end of the book, they speak of the ancient Egyptian goddess Sekhmet. During this conversation, they describe Sekhmet as an all-knowing goddess. That she sees and hears everything on earth, pretty much as God can see and hear everything on earth. Sekhmet then states that during Judgment Day, all foul creatures of this earth will be killed and their souls will be judged. During the conversation, Stan Wolf is told that the spark, or the beginning of the global turning, will begin from the Untersberg in Bavaria, Germany. In book 3 of Gems of Dominion, the Isis ritual at Untersberg mountain, there's another conversation with Dr. Hans Kammler, where practically Dr. Hans Kammler shows Stan Wolf and Linda practically the chronoscope, that is practically a binoculars that can look back in time. And since you know that the Akashic Chronic is practically stored forever and ever and ever, it's practically a continuum of realities going back in time, is the global memory of the world, or the Akasha library, or the Akasha Chronic. And this Akasha Chronic can be made visible using technology. And Dr. Hans Kammler then explains that you should look at the valley, and then Stan Wolf looks through the chronoscope and sees practically the going back in time, the changing of the landscape and the changing of the buildings, and even the changing of the railways where a tram is practically traveling on. At the very beginning, around 1890, it's just a tram on coal, then it changes to electricity, and then it totally is removed altogether and then replaced by a road because Austria is no longer part of Germany, etc., etc., etc. So you could look at practically through the chronoscope, look back in time. And he says that these technologies will be made available after the global turning, when all these suppressed technologies globally will be offered to mankind to practically, to witness history on your own. Yeah, you could witness history, free energy, anti-gravitics, healthcare. We'll know that cancer is curable, all diseases are curable, but the pharma industry wants you to stay sick and practically dying all the time, so that you consume their drugs and keep consuming, and practically they're destroying the people using the pharmaceutical industry. Yeah, we will know that we can heal all diseases, and that by eating well, mostly vegetarian, maybe sometimes meat, but not necessarily, you know, the future is predominantly vegetarian, I believe. Meat eating will not vanish altogether. Maybe we'll eat that meat like once a week, but we will know that eating predominantly fruits and vegetables and all types of plant-like nourishment is more healthy than eating meat all the time. And we will try to make such a balanced diet, and such a balance, we will also drink less alcohol, smoke less, and be very conscious of our own health. That is the future that awaits us. So Stan Wolf was able to see through the chronoscope what after the global turning will be available to all mankind. This was not the first time practically that I heard of a chronoscope or a chronovisor. I had a Facebook post a couple of months ago, half a year ago, from Father Ernetti. He also described the invention of a chronovisor back in the 1950s. And he was part of a group from Ernetti and Werner von Braun. So he worked with Werner von Braun, and Werner von Braun worked together with Dr. Hans Kammler on the same technology. So you already have the connection to the Third Reich. Two different sources depicting the same technology, all depicting that it is real, that it works, and that they could look back in time. And Father Ernetti then describes in his confession practically that he saw practically the crucifixion of Jesus Christ through the chronovisor or chronoscope. The Imperial Germans had practically already these technologies, the chronoscopes, before the end of the war. So they knew practically, they could look back in time and could see what happened already back in time and see practically the truth for themselves, although they already researched the truth, revisionist history practically by themselves for 12 years straight. They could witness history by using the chronoscopes, and they could also look into the future, so they knew what was coming towards them by the end of the war. Yeah, the total genocide of the Third Reich and its people. Over 17 million people were brutally slaughtered and killed during and afterward in 1945. The Zionist Jews of America, who controlled American politics and the mass media back then, forced Americans to wage war against the Third Reich, and the Jewish-controlled Soviet Russia also waged war against the Third Reich for making itself free of Zionist control, of Jewish Zionist control. So, yeah, the Third Reich had to be exterminated and, well, re-brainwashed and reprogrammed, and that's what they did. So Hans Kammler and the Third Reich and the top high brass all made plans, Adolf Hitler, all made plans to evacuate at least a small part of the population in safe areas. And at Untersberg apparently there were time portals, and Dr. Hans Kammler then describes also in these books the Project Lanternbearer and Project Chronos and Project Glocke, or Bell, that they created time portals and even Andromeda devices, those long cigar-shaped UFOs that traveled back in time. And they evacuated thousands of people into different times well, these projects were incredible, yeah, and yeah, well, once you are free in the mind, yeah, and free to think and to really use science as a tool to create technology that could serve us all, then you can understand why it's possible to create anti-gravity spacecraft during the reign of the Third Reich. The Imperial Germans, after making those experiments in time, found out that they could not influence the timeline in such a way that they could gain victory hundreds of years ago, if not thousands of years ago. That's just not possible. Also, Dr. Hans Kammler talks about other beings, well, extraterrestrials, and the inner earthen peoples, well, the Agarthians, from the inner earth of Agartha. He talks of the other beings, but I already assume that he knows about the extraterrestrials from Aldebaran, the Nordic aliens, and that he knows about the Agarthians, well, the Nordics, the Aryans from the inner earth, and possibly also from the giants that also live in the inner earth. Well, in book 4 of Stan Wolf, The Golden Ball at Untersberg, Stan Wolf makes a trip to base 3 of the Imperial Germans. He and Linda can witness the beautiful small colony of the Imperial Germans. He and Linda can witness the beautiful small colony the Imperial Germans built 15,000 years ago, somewhere on an island in the Atlantic Ocean. Stan Wolf describes the modern vehicles or UFO-type aircraft the Imperial Germans use in that base, and that they get all their free energy power from a central obelisk. The energy obelisk transmits free energy up to 500 kilometers away, the guy tells Wolf during the sightseeing tour. So they created practically a colony 15,000 years ago, the Imperial Germans, and on an island in the Atlantic, and they contain themselves to a 500 kilometer radius. They are protected from foreign elements by some type of shielding device. Yeah, well, it's incredible. It's base free. Yeah, it's simply incredible what he describes there. You know, you have to know that every book of Stan Wolf, yeah, describes 1 year in real life. And he meets up to 2 or 3 times in every book with Dr. Hans Kammler and with other people, of course. But for me, most important, of course, is Dr. Hans Kammler as a direct source to the Imperial Germans. Dr. Hans Kammler has been viewed multiple times in history, yeah, in the 70s also, from another author who also wrote books about the subject under a pseudonym, or on a different name, Die Neun Unbekannte, the Nine Unknowns. The Nine Unknowns, that is the name of the book, the German book that the first author described, also the meeting of Dr. Hans Kammler in the 70s. And now in the modern era you can view videos on YouTube portraying also women, a middle-aged woman, stating that she also saw Hans Kammler at her restaurant. Yeah, so it's multiple sources already depicting this. So I believe that this is real. At least more and more sources confirm this, and I have an open mind. And yeah, Stan Wolf or Wolfgang Stadler does not tell us everything. Yeah, but some things are to the extreme. I'll tell you about in the book 5. So every book is 1 year. Yeah, and he's gonna most likely write a book every year until the day of the global turning or the day of judgment. He also describes meeting with someone he describes as a member of the Illuminati, but isn't actually a member of the Illuminati, but a time traveler from a parallel reality. And this is where actually I think in book 5 he describes himself as a time traveling hero, saving or removing people, evil people from their power and putting them in different timelines. Again, he says himself that it is fiction with reality. But the problem is, what is fictitious and what is reality? Yeah, it's difficult seeing Stan Wolf as an interdimensional hero battling evil in the timeline. Yeah, nevertheless, it's very interesting. I have a very open eye, open ear with what Dr. Hans Kammler always says, no? Because it always makes sense. Yeah, as an example, in book 2 he describes that the Third Reich was the only time practically that the Germans were really free and it was a real good society. He says there's truth in it. So yeah, I agree there. His latest book, this book 8, is named Game Over, The Future Begins, and will describe the events of year 2016, well, the latest year. Stan Wolf also announced that he'll be writing a 9th book. What I got from the books 5, 6 and 7, from the last 2 books, is that the Imperial Germans are preparing for the global turning. In one part, Stan Wolf is shown the central command base of the Imperial Germans. General Kammler says that it is the present, and it is in the present, not in the past, and in a hidden place on Earth. Hans Kammler is most likely saying that the base is located in Nagarta, in the vicinity of New Berlin or New Berlin. In his last book, Kammler says that during the Project Chronos, Lanternbearer and SS Glocke or SS Bell, that some type of accident occurred that created a second timeline. At the base 3 where Stan Wolf and Linda went into, at the base 3 where Stan Wolf and Linda went to in book 4, was actually a parallel timeline. And that this accident was connected to the Philadelphia experiment of 1943. Something happened in 1943 that created apparently a split in the timeline, and yeah, well, a second timeline then came into existence. Series that depict parallel realities or a parallel universe are, as an example, Fringe, or Star Trek Deep Space Nine with its mirror universe, and the series Sliders. I'm not sure how a second timeline can be created, but I started thinking about it. I was told back then that the fabric of reality is based on energy or light, and that matter is a slow vibrating condensed form of energy or light. If we are made of energy or light, then light can be split into 2 different beams with special prism or optics. If reality is like a holographic universe, that everything is contained within everything, yeah, then you can think that 2 timelines can be created from the main reality. Well, this is my thinking behind it. It's not totally wiped out. I have not come to a totally logical way of explaining this, you know. According to Hans Kammler, the accident occurred in 1943, where 2 timelines came into existence. In this parallel timeline, the Imperial Germans already won, and they are living in the new golden age. Apparently, you can access this parallel reality through artificially made portals at the Kammler base at the Untersberg in Bavaria, Germany. Hans Kammler says that there's enough space to accommodate thousands of possible refugees during the global turning, although most people will not know of the safe haven because they simply have never heard of it. In summary, Stan Wolf made contact with General Hans Kammler at Untersberg in Bavaria, Germany. For the SS soldiers and the general living at the station, time goes up to 300 times more slower down outside the station. This means that for us, up to 70 years have passed, but for Kammler and his staff, only 3 months have passed. Kammler says that for him and his unit, they are the only ones left from the old guard. All others are children or the children of the next generation Imperial Germans. Stan Wolf, also known as Wolfgang Stadler, is not the only person to have had contact with the General Hans Kammler at Untersberg in Bavaria, Germany. Others have also seen him. On YouTube you can see a German woman stating that she saw the general. Well, she actually served the general food, and then people asked her, through the pictures that are available online over at General Hans Kammler, if this is the man that she saw, and she said yes. He had a civil dark grey type uniform on, and looked like the guy on the pictures that you can find online over Hans Kammler. The Imperial Germans have colony in Nagarta in the past. Well, the Imperial Germans have colonies in the past, apparently, according to Wolfgang Stadler or Stan Wolf, and according to his books, have colonies in Nagarta in the inner earth, have colonies in South America. Well, there are apparently bases in South America. The Imperial Germans have bases all around the world. Have apparently a colony on the far side of the moon, where the Disclosure Project depicted that the confession of a witness depicted that there's a base on the far side of the moon, and that is an Imperial German base, another confirmation of it, and apparently also on Mars, the Andromeda devices, or the Imperial German Andromeda device, anti-gravitic spacecraft, long-range carrier spacecraft, have been seen on Mars. The Mars rover made pictures of it, of a cigar-shaped UFO on Mars. And well, the Imperial Germans are a Type 1 stellar civilization, I believe. They have bases on the moon on Mars, and possibly also on other moons and planets in our solar system, and are in contact with the Aldebaranic Aryans from the Taurus constellation, and that this is an ongoing process, and that there are also other stellar civilizations out there that visit us on a regular basis. So this is all a reality that has to be researched, and you have to open your mind to this possibility. At the end, the truth will always be the same. At the end, everybody will understand each other, because everybody will be talking the truth. Yeah? That's why it's actually meant with everybody will understand each other. Once everybody knows the truth, they have a common language, the truth. Well, I hope you enjoyed this video. By the way, if you are interested in reading these books, yeah, the first two are already in English. You can order them online. I'll put the link below. They're very interesting. The conversations with the general are very interesting. The conversations with the time traveler are also very interesting. And of course, the general theory behind time traveling is also very interesting. That you can't create a time paradox. That's not possible. And that stellar civilizations that have understood these universal temporal laws, understand these laws and travel in time as they wish to, just for their own, for research purposes, and well, for historical research as an example. Well, I hope you enjoyed this video. Many greetings from the Apollo Netherlands, and cheers!